Horton's World Mythology welcomes you. Have you ever walked through a forest at dusk, when the moonlight struggles to pierce the canopy above? In those moments, familiar shapes twist into monstrous forms, and the wind carries whispers that sound almost like words. We ask if the rustle in the undergrowth is just an animal or something more ancient with teeth and claws. The shadows hold more than secrets. They hold echoes of forgotten truths and seeds of powerful fictions. Tonight we journey into that darkness where truth and legend collide. At first glance, myth and fiction seem alike, worlds of magic, heroes and impossible creatures. But myth is not just entertainment, it's the foundation of cultures, once believed as truth. We know Harry Potter is fiction, but ancient peoples saw their myths as reality. That's the difference. Fiction is a choice. Myth was a world people truly inhabited. If you enjoy this video so far, please like and subscribe to help the channel grow. And now back to the video. To understand the divide between myth and fiction, we must journey back to a time when stories were sung and chanted, not written. In the world of oral tradition, stories were living entities passed from generation to generation, shaping identity and belief. In ancient India, the Mahabharata was chanted as sacred ritual, preserving history and truth. Temples were homes of gods, and myths were reality, guiding justice, morality, and comfort in a chaotic world. At first glance, myth and fiction seem the same, worlds of magic, epic battles, and impossible creatures. But fiction is a conscious act of creation, a world built by an architect of words. The author invites us into their imagination, asking us to accept their reality, knowing it's an illusion. This shared understanding is the heart of fiction, a beautiful, intricate lie we gladly accept for a time. Myths are not just stories, they are the foundational truths of entire cultures, born from the collective consciousness of generations. They explained the universe, the seasons, life and death, and the moral codes by which societies lived. Myths were not inventions but inheritances, sacred legacies passed down, shaping every aspect of life. Their echo still reverberates long after the original belief has faded. The key difference between myth and fiction is belief. Fiction, like Harry Potter, entertains us, but we know it's not real. We visit its world, then return to ours unchanged. Myths, however, were lived realities. The Greeks believed in Olympus, the Norse in Ragnarok, the Egyptians in the underworld. These stories shaped daily life, rituals, and even the landscape. Myth demanded devotion. It was a cosmology, not just entertainment. Understanding this distinction lets us appreciate how these stories built civilizations. To understand myth, we must return to the age of oral tradition. Stories were not read, they were performed, chanted and shared around fires, binding communities together. The Mahabharata, for example, was preserved through precise recitation, not just for entertainment but as a sacred act. Oral myths carried knowledge, history and identity. Encoded in rhythm and ritual, speaking a god's name invoked their presence, recounting a hero's deeds drew on their power. These stories were living forces, shaping reality and culture. The storyteller's breath carried a civilization's soul into the future. Myth shaped the physical world as much as the spiritual. Ancient people built temples and made pilgrimages to places where gods and heroes were believed to have walked. Structures like the Parthenon weren't just symbolic, they were seen as the gods' actual homes. Rituals, geography and art reinforced belief, making myth a tangible part of daily life. The world itself became proof of the stories. Belief was not just internal, it was carved in stone and lived every day. Myths were the foundation of ancient reality, guiding justice, morality, and power. Kings ruled by divine right, their authority rooted in sacred stories. Myths set the rules for right and wrong, inspiring both hope and fear. They explained chaos. Disasters were the will of gods, not random events. Rituals offered agency in a frightening world. These stories were not escapes, they were the lens through which reality was understood. Not all myths comforted, many warned. Monsters like Leviathan, Wendigo and Fenrir embodied chaos, greed and destruction. These tales were survival guides, teaching respect for real dangers, famine, war, social collapse. The horror was purposeful, arming listeners with fear and caution. Myths didn't create fantasy. They prepared people for the darkness beyond the firelight. The monsters were real because the threats they represented were real. The darkness in myth often came from the gods themselves. Ancient deities were powerful but flawed, capable of cruelty, jealousy and vengeance. Zeus's violence, Hera's wrath, Apollo's cruelty, these were not sanitized tales. The gods' unpredictability explained suffering and injustice in the world. Heroes, too, were deeply flawed, committing acts of violence and betrayal. Myths showed that both gods and mortals were capable of monstrous acts. These stories reflected the dual nature of humanity and the divine. Myths filled the world with terrifying monsters and cruel gods, creating powerful moral force fields. Fear was their tool, enforcing social and religious norms. The darkness in these tales set boundaries, warning of dire consequences for transgression. Tantalus's endless torment showed that punishment could be eternal, a warning against hubris. The Furies embodied relentless vengeance, making fear a force for social cohesion. Myths became blueprints for reality, where moral failings had cosmic consequences. As writing emerged, myth was shaped by the conscious hand of the artist. At this crossroads, epics like Homer's Iliad transformed sacred tales into crafted stories. These works weren't just folklore, they were deliberate, sophisticated fiction, blending myth and art. The line between belief and imagination began to blur, giving birth to proto-fiction, the ancestor of the modern novel. The dance between myth and fiction continues today, as modern authors reimagine ancient tales for new times, pouring new wine into old skins. Recent novels retell myths from fresh perspectives, giving voice and agency to characters once sidelined. This blurs the line between myth and fiction, honouring the originals while challenging their authority. Each retelling becomes a conversation between the ancient and the modern, keeping these stories alive. So why do these ancient patterns persist? Why do writers of fiction continually return to the well of myth? The scholar Joseph Campbell offered a compelling answer with his concept of the monomyth, or the hero's journey. Campbell studied myths from all over the world and discovered that they often share a fundamental structure. A hero is called to adventure, faces a series of trials and ordeals in a supernatural world, wins a decisive victory and returns home transformed, bearing a gift or boon for their people. This universal pattern, he argued, is a deep psychological blueprint for human experience. This structure, ordeal, transformation and return, is not just the backbone of ancient myth. It is the echo we hear in countless works of fiction. From Luke Skywalker in to Frodo Baggins in and Harry Potter, our most beloved modern heroes follow this ancient path. They leave their ordinary world, confront dark forces in a realm of wonders, and return changed by their experience. Fiction, it seems, has inherited its most powerful narrative DNA directly from myth. The stories we tell ourselves today are still shaped by the same archetypal journey that our ancestors told around the fire. The key difference, however, lies in the story's claim to authority. A work of fiction presents the hero's journey as a powerful metaphor. It is a story about personal growth, courage, and self-discovery that resonates with our own lives. We see ourselves in the hero's struggles and triumphs. A myth, on the other hand, presented this journey not as a metaphor, but as a sacred reality. The hero's journey was not just an inspiring story, it was a map of the cosmos, a description of the soul's passage through life and death. and a literal account of how the world was saved or shaped by a divine or semi-divine being. This is where myth as proto-fiction reveals its true nature. Myth provided the original, powerful templates for storytelling, the archetypes, the conflicts, and the narrative arcs that speak to something fundamental within us. Fiction takes these templates and uses them to craft new worlds and explore new ideas, free from the burden of having to be believed as literal truth. The hero's journey shows us that myth and fiction both draw water from the same deep, ancient well of human consciousness. But while fiction uses that water to nourish our imagination, myth used it to command our very souls. For centuries, we've separated history from myth, one built on evidence, the other on gods and legends, but sometimes the line blurs. Troy, once thought pure fiction, was unearthed by Schliemann, revealing myth rooted in reality. Myths can echo real events, reminding us that legend and history are often closer than we think. While archaeology can confirm the setting of a myth, what about the monsters and gods? These fantastical elements are powerful metaphors for real dangers, like floods, earthquakes, and disease that ancient people faced. A dragon's fiery breath could describe a volcanic eruption, while a sea serpent personifies the unpredictable ocean. Myths weave fact and metaphor, encoding survival and emotion into stories that still resonate today. In our modern world, it's tempting to think myth-making is over. But our need for powerful stories remains. Today's sprawling fictional universes, like Star Wars and superhero sagas, are our modern myths. These stories shape how we see good, evil, and ourselves, just as ancient myths once did. However, before we declare that a Jedi is the modern equivalent of a Greek god, we must remember the crucial distinction that has been the thread of our entire journey, the anchor of belief. While modern fictions can inspire and unite us, they lack the fundamental component that transformed ancient stories into myth. We do not genuinely believe that superheroes will fly down to save us, nor do we perform rituals to harness the power of the Force. Our engagement with these stories is primarily one of imagination and artistic appreciation, not of literal faith or religious devotion that shapes our entire reality. This is the essential difference. Myth was never just a story. It was a system that anchored entire communities, providing a framework for justice, ritual, and a perceived relationship with the cosmos. It often replaced or became the historical truth for its followers. The story of Harry Potter, for all its cultural significance, does not command this level of authority. It sparks our imagination, teaches valuable lessons about bravery and friendship, and creates a global community of fans. But it does not dictate our laws, explain natural phenomena, or promise us an afterlife. The story is a world we visit, not the world we inhabit. So, while our modern fictions may become the cultural touchstones of the future, it is unlikely they will become myths in the truest sense of the word. They will be seen as powerful works of art, as reflections of our society's dreams and anxieties, but not as sacred truths. The line between fiction and reality, while sometimes blurred for entertainment, remains firmly in place in our daily lives. We know where the story ends and where the real world begins. This critical distance prevents today's fiction from making the leap into tomorrow's genuine mythology. Therefore, as we consume these powerful modern narratives, we must remain grounded. We can celebrate the way fiction sparks our imagination and builds communities, but we must also recognize the unique and formidable power of true myth. A power that anchored societies, but also sometimes replaced verifiable truth with compelling dogma. So, the next time you hear a legend, ancient or modern, of gods or super beings, ask yourself that crucial question. Is this just a story that entertains and inspires, or is it something more? A narrative that commands belief and shapes the very world its followers see. We began our journey in a moonlit forest, seeking the line between myth and fiction, a border more mist than wall. What we found is that the true difference lies not in magic or monsters, but in the power of belief. Myths shaped reality for our ancestors, as solid as the ground beneath their feet. Today, our modern sagas echo those ancient tales, guiding us through our own world. So next time you hear a legend, ask yourself, is this just a story or something more? The night is dark, and it is full of stories yet to be told. Their stories are timeless reflections of the human condition. And ask yourself, do you believe? Do you dare to explore the unknown, to confront the shadows that lurk in the dark corners of our world? We may stumble upon truths more unsettling than the shadows themselves. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey through the history of the mythology. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to Horton's World Mythology for more explorations into the world's most fascinating myths and legends. And don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What other mythical creatures or legends would you like us to explore next? Share your ideas, and let's keep the flame burning bright. And, as always, stay curious.